Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you've been with us for the last few sessions, you'll know we were really deep in the weeds with the theory of dialectical behavior therapy.
We're building the architecture, you could say, laying the foundations.
Exactly. We were talking about mindfulness and, that big ambitious goal of finding the wise mind, that perfect balance point between the hot emotional mind and the cold rational mind.
Right. And that was all about awareness. Just drawing the map, really.
Yeah.
Understanding the terrain of your own psychology before you try to, navigate it.
It was all theory, all internal architecture. But now we're making I guess you'd call it a hard pivot. Yeah. We're stepping out of the classroom and onto the emotional battlefield.
Emotional first aid. I like that.
That's what it feels like. We're diving straight into the module of distress tolerance.
Duh.
And the goal here seems so simple on the surface, but I think it's one of the hardest things a person can do.
Which is?
Just enduring these incredibly painful, intense moments without doing something that makes your life a whole lot worse in the long run.
And that is the perfect setup for the central paradox that underpins this entire idea. It's the hook for this whole deep dive, really.
Go on.
You absolutely cannot change what you will not first see and then fully, radically accept.
See, that just immediately feels wrong to me. It feels like it goes against everything we're taught. We're conditioned to fight, right? To fix, to change anything that makes us uncomfortable.
We are. And what happens when you fight reality?
I mean, either win or you lose, I guess.
You always lose.
Yeah.
Because you can't win against reality.
Yeah.
But fighting the reality of a situation, that guarantees one thing.
What's that?
The continuation of your own suffering.
Okay, let's stop right there. The word suffering, it sounds so grand, So philosophical. But in this context, in DBT, it's not a poem. It's an equation.
It's mathematical. It's as precise as you can get. The formula is pain plus non-acceptance equals suffering.
Unpack those variables for us. Pain.
Pain is the thing that happens. It's the unavoidable reality. The initial emotional shock, the physical sensation, the actual event that occurred. A flat tire, a harsh word from your boss, a loss. Pain is often temporary. It's finite.
But the suffering, that's the part we add on top.
That is the part we have control over. Suffering is the prolonged, self-inflicted war against the reality of the pain. It's the internal monologue screaming, this shouldn't have happened, or I shouldn't feel this way. That resistance, that non-acceptance, is the variable that's optional.
So if pain is the wave that reality throws at you, radical acceptance is what? Learning to surf it instead of trying to build a wall to stop the entire ocean.
That's a great way to put it. Radical acceptance is the skill that stops you from drowning. It frees up all the energy you were wasting trying to fight the ocean. And that's why it's the cornerstone of distress tolerance. You have to first tolerate the fact that you're wet before you can even think about swimming to shore.
All right, so let's define it properly. Radical acceptance. We hear the word acceptance all the time, but that word radical, it sounds extreme. What does it really mean?
It commits us to something pretty profound. It's about seeing reality exactly as it is. Without the varnish, without the story, we immediately layer on top of it.
And when you say reality, you mean everything.
All three levels we've talked about. The physical reality, the tension in your shoulders, that lump in your throat, the emotional reality, the actual surge of anger or fear, and the mental reality, the thoughts that are just spinning in your head.
And seeing all of that without adding the narrative.
Without adding the this should be happening to me, or the if only I'd done something different, or that really insidious one, why me?
The victim story.
Yes. The radical part is just stripping all of that away. It's the shift from what DBT calls willfulness to willingness.
Willfulness sounds strong, though, like willpower.
It sounds strong, but it's actually incredibly draining. Willfulness is the clenched fist. It's fighting. It's clinging to how things should be. It's exhausting. I think most of us live in a state of constant low-grade willfulness.
Yeah, I think we see willingness as being passive. Like you're just giving up, surrendering.
And that's the big misunderstanding. It's not passive resignation. It's an active participation in reality as it is.
Yeah.
It's a conscious choice to drop the rope in the tug of war, not because you like the mud pit in the middle, but because you realize pulling is just getting you covered in more mud.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics. The why. Why is acceptance the absolute non-negotiable first step before you can change anything? What's happening in the brain?
This is the key. If you're stuck in non-acceptance, if your whole system is screaming, this can't be happening, your brain registers that as a profound, immediate threat.
Even if the threat is just, like, being late for a meeting.
It doesn't matter. The neurological response is the same as if a tiger just walked into the room. Your amygdala, that ancient reptilian part of your brain, it just lights up. It takes over.
The fight or flight center.
Right. And when the amygdala is in charge, it performs a kind of neurological triage. It diverts all the energy, blood flow, glucose away from the sophisticated, slow, rational parts of your brain.
The prefrontal cortex. The
Right.
wise mind center.
Gone. It goes offline. Because in the face of a tiger, you don't need to do complex problem solving or consider nuance. You need to run or fight. So in that state of non-acceptance, you literally, physically cannot access the part of your brain that makes new, wise choices.
You're forced to rely on your old programming, your defaults.
Your oldest, most deeply carved algorithms. If your default setting is, when I feel threatened, I yell, or when I feel ashamed, I shut down, then that's what's going to happen. The wise mind is locked in a closet, and the toddler with a hammer is running the show.
That analogy we used before about the parking brake.
Yeah.
It feels so much more real now. You're flooring the gas, the engine is screaming, that's the emotional surge. But you're going nowhere. You're just burning fuel.
Let's really sit with that. The non-acceptance is the friction. It's the smell of burning rubber. That's the adrenal fatigue, the physical stress that builds up in your body.
Yeah.
You're expending a massive amount of psychic and physical energy, but you haven't moved an inch.
And radical acceptance is just taking the parking brake off.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the road ahead is suddenly smooth or sunny. The flat tire is still flat. But at least now, when you press the gas, you can start to move forward.
This makes the idea of fake acceptance so much more dangerous then. Because we're smart, right?
Yeah.
We can convince ourselves we've accepted something when we really haven't.
Oh, this is the trap for highly cognitive people. We call it rationally accepted versus radically integrated.
Explain that.
You can logically understand a problem perfectly. You can say, okay, I understand why my colleague is unreliable. He's overwhelmed. He has issues at home. Makes perfect rational sense. And you tick a little mental box. Accepted.
But you've only accepted it with your cold, rational mind.
Exactly. You've completely ignored the internal emotional reality, the bubbling pot of resentment, the feeling of being disrespected, the anger. That feeling doesn't just go away because you have a good explanation for it.
The logical mind is satisfied, but the emotional bomb is still ticking.
And it will go off. Maybe not in that moment. Maybe it'll go off later that day when your kid spills milk on the floor. Or maybe it'll go off the next time that same colleague is 5 minutes late and you explode with a force that is completely out of proportion to the situation.
Because it wasn't about those 5 minutes. It was about the 50 other times that you rationally accepted but never emotionally processed.
That's it. True radical acceptance has to happen on all three levels: mind, body, and emotion.
Yeah.
You have to accept the logical reason and the anger in your gut and the tension in your jaw, all of it.
So to bring it back to the formula, suffering really is just that gap, the gap between the world we want and the world we have.
It's the tension in that gap. It's the space between our dreamed reality, our expectations, our sense of fairness, our illusion of control, and what is actually factually happening right now. The wider that gap, the more suffering you experience. When you radically accept the what is, that gap collapses, and all the energy you were using to hold it open is suddenly free.
I have to share that story again, the one with my colleague, because it's the perfect, embarrassing example of this whole fake acceptance thing blowing up in my face.
I think it's a perfect teaching story. It grounds all this theory in something real and messy. So set the scene for us again.
Okay. So it was a really important team meeting, complex topic, a lot of prep. And this colleague, he was the one who initiated it. He was supposed to be leading it. I walked in, completely prepared, expecting him to be there.
Right, you had an expectation, a dreamed reality for how the meeting would go.
Totally. And then 8 minutes before it's supposed to start, my phone rings. It's him.
The time pressure alone is a trigger.
He launches into this long, winding monologue about where he is and what he's doing. And it's all very important, of course, but he keeps dancing around the point. He never just says, I'm not coming.
The passive avoidance.
I literally had to corner him. I had to say, so just to be crystal clear, you will not be at the meeting that you organize, which starts in 5 minutes. Is that correct? And his answer was, well, yes, that would probably suit me best.
Wow, okay.
And the second I hung up the phone, I just exploded. And this is the key part. I thought I had accepted his personality. I know this guy. I've worked with him for years. I know he's spontaneous and, a bit chaotic. I thought I had rationally accepted it.
It's fake acceptance.
But the anger was. It was not proportional. I said things I wouldn't normally say. It was a pure reactive explosion. So my question to you is, where did that much energy come from? And was it really about him?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer, almost always, is no. The anger was not truly about your colleague.
And what was it about?
Your colleague was just the catalyst. He was the mirror. He was a projection of something you haven't accepted inside yourself.
My shadow self, the part of me I've rejected.
Precisely. Think about it. What does he represent? He's spontaneous, disorganized, a rule breaker, someone who lives completely in the moment without a plan.
Everything I'm not, or everything I try not to be. I'm structured, I'm a planner, I'm punctual.
You have spent a lifetime building a careful, organized, responsible identity. You have taken the spontaneous, messy, rule-breaking part of your own potential and locked it in a cage in the basement of your psyche.
So when he shows up, acting that way.
He's not just being annoying. He is rattling the bars of that cage. Your ego, the part of you that built that organized identity, has a full-blown panic attack. It screams, I have worked so hard to keep that messy person locked up, and here he is walking around free, proving that chaos is an option.
So the rage wasn't you're late. The rage was, how dare you remind me of the part of myself I despise and work so hard to suppress?
Yes. The explosion was all that energy you used to keep your own shadow self caged, suddenly boiling over.
Yeah.
The radical acceptance you needed in that moment wasn't to accept your colleague's lateness. It was to accept the potential for that same spontaneity and disorganization within yourself.
Wow. Okay. That really lands. I hate the mirror because it's showing me a part of myself I've exiled.
And once you can look at that part of yourself with acceptance, not approval, just acceptance that it exists as a potential within you, the external person loses their power. The colleague is no longer a threat to your entire worldview. He's just a guy who's late for a meeting.
So if I find myself getting irrationally angry at a slow driver in the fast lane.
You should ask yourself, what part of my life is moving too slowly?
Right.
What goal am I not reaching fast enough? The slow driver is just a symbol for your own rejected slowness.
Or if I get furious with a friend who's being cheap.
Maybe that reflects your own deep, unaccepted fear of scarcity. You project your own internal financial anxiety onto them. This is the ultimate trap of knowing the tools, but not doing the work. You think because you know the term radical acceptance, you're safe. But you've only done the intellectual part. The emotional shadow part is still waiting with a lit match.
It's not about tolerating bad behavior. It's about disarming the trigger internally so you can respond with choice instead of raw reaction.
You get to choose. You move from an automatic, threat-based explosion to a conscious, okay, this is annoying, but it's not a threat to my identity. How do I want to handle this? The threat is gone.
All right, this is a perfect pivot point. We've talked a lot about negative triggers, the distress, but distress tolerance has to apply to the good stuff too, right? To positive stress, or what's the word? Eustress.
Absolutely. This is a part of the work that is so often missed, and it's maybe even more important. We have to apply the same radical acceptance to our emotional highs.
Why? Why would I want to analyze or tolerate feeling great?
Because your highs and your lows are two ends of the same stick. We have to look at what's called the praise-criticism cycle.
Okay, what's that?
The intense, euphoric feeling of validation you get from praise.
Yeah, when your boss says you nailed a project, it feels amazing.
That amazing feeling is directly, mathematically proportional to the devastation you feel when you get criticized. Both extremes, the dizzying high and the crushing low, reveal the exact same thing. A fragile, externalized sense of self-worth.
So you're saying my self-worth is basically plugged into someone else's opinion.
It's a fantastic analogy.
Sure.
You're running your emotional operating system on their power supply. The second they pull the plug by offering criticism, or even just indifference, your whole system shuts down. You've got no internal battery.
So applying acceptance to the positive highs is about building my own internal power source.
Exactly. And let's be really clear. This is not about becoming a robot. It's not about not feeling joy when you succeed. Joy is wonderful.
So we're not aiming for emotional flatness.
Not at all. The goal is not suppression, it's observation. It's about understanding why that high feels so incredibly high. Because if it's so high that it takes you out of your wise mind, that's a problem. A crash is coming.
So there's a practical exercise here. When I feel that rush of euphoria from praise, what should I be doing internally?
You pause right in the middle of feeling great, and you ask yourself a couple questions. Why do I feel so good right now? What specific internal insecurity is this external praise patching over?
That's a tough question to ask when you're feeling good.
It is, but it's crucial. You might find the answer is, I'm so happy because this person's approval finally makes me feel competent because I can't generate that feeling for myself.
And that reframes the whole thing. I'm not just getting a compliment, I'm using that person as a drug to fix a vulnerability.
You're using them to regulate your self-worth. The practice is to shift from that dependency to building an internal structure that's stable, whether the praise comes or not.
Okay, but I can hear the immediate counter-argument. If you tell people don't depend on external validation, the risk is they swing to the other extreme. They put up a wall and declare, I don't care what anyone thinks.
The brittle, hyper-independent stance.
Yeah, which is usually just another form of fragility, isn't it?
It's the dialectical trap in action. You fight against needing validation, and you just create a new shadow self. The antisocial person who needs no one. Then you have to start accepting that guy.
So we need external feedback. We're social animals.
We absolutely do. External validation is necessary for growth. It's how we learn and integrate new parts of ourselves. Feeling good when someone praises you is healthy. The key question is what happens after the validation.
Does it lead to integration or just reinforce the dependency?
Right. Does the praise help you internalize that sense of competence so you need their specific validation a little bit less next time? That's integration. Or does it just feel good for a moment, leaving you desperate for another hit tomorrow? That's dependency. We're aiming for stable integration, not a life without compliments.
This idea of the repeating cycle, the dependency, it leads perfectly into what I think is the biggest source of frustration for anyone trying to do this work. Repetition.
With this again.
Feeling.
Yes.
You have the breakthrough. You do the work. You radically accept the chaotic colleague or the traffic or whatever it is. And you feel great. And then 2 weeks later, the exact same trigger happens and you have the exact same intense reaction. And you just think, I thought I fixed this. Why is it happening again?
That frustration is completely universal.
Yeah.
It's because we have the wrong expectation about what fixing it means. We have to understand the sheer depth of what we're dealing with.
Autopilot.
It's more than an autopilot.
Yeah.
These automatic patterns are ancient. Some are inherited from the species, our basic survival wiring. Others are shaped by our family, our culture. And then they're reinforced by decades of our own personal experience.
So it's not just a bad habit. It's like deep geological programming.
It is. So the idea that one aha moment, one great therapy session, one act of radical acceptance is going to completely rewrite that code is, frankly, naive. The pattern will weaken. The intensity might lessen, but the scar on the nervous system will likely always be there.
So the frustration comes from having the wrong goal.
Exactly. We need to shift from goal-oriented acceptance to process-oriented acceptance.
Well, what's the difference?
Goal-oriented acceptance says, I'm going to use this acceptance tool to make this bad feeling stop forever. When the feeling comes back, you feel like a failure.
Right.
Process-oriented acceptance says, my job is to meet every single wave of this feeling, no matter how many times it comes, with renewed awareness and willingness. It's not a project with an end date. It's a practice, like meditation.
So the return of the feeling isn't a failure. It's just another rep, another chance to practice.
It's another opportunity to strengthen the new neural pathway. And it gets even more complicated because we're not doing this work in a bubble. The world reacts to our changes.
What do you mean?
This is the algorithm of interaction. When you consciously change one of your core patterns, the people around you who have built their own patterns in response to yours get thrown off. And they will often subconsciously act in ways that try to pull you back to the old way.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, let's use an attachment pattern. Say you've always been a bit anxious and clingy in relationships. You do the work, you become more secure, more self-sufficient, you stop texting so much, you give the other person space.
Okay, that's the change.
The other person who is used to you closing the distance might feel that space as a void. And their own pattern might be to withdraw when they feel anxious. So as you pull back a little, they might pull back a lot.
And the second they do that, it triggers my deepest fear of abandonment, and I immediately revert back to the old clingy pattern to try and close the gap again.
And boom, the system resets. The environment's reaction to your positive change validated your oldest, deepest fear. This is why the work is constant. The system is dialectical. It's always in motion. The second you find a point of balance, the world will push on it to test its stability.
So what's the practical advice here? It feels a little hopeless.
Not at all. The key is to stop fighting every individual battle. Look for the underlying theme. Don't see the late colleague, the slow driver, and the neighbor who doesn't recycle as three separate problems.
Find the common denominator.
Yes. Maybe the theme is injustice, or people not following the rules, or my time isn't being respected. Once you identify that core underlying theme, you can practice radically accepting that theme as a feature of reality instead of getting exhausted fighting every single example of it. You focus your energy on the root, not the branches.
Okay, so if this is a constant process, we have to be really smart about where we put our energy. We need a clear inventory, a decision tree. What must be accepted and what can we actually work on changing?
This is probably the most practical take-home part of the whole discussion. This is the list that stops you from wasting your life fighting unwinnable battles. So let's start with the unchangeable. The things you must radically accept.
Number one.
The past and the future. You have zero power to change what has already happened. The energy you spend ruminating, replaying conversations, wishing you'd done something different, it's all wasted. It's gone.
And the future.
You can't live there either. The when I get X, then I'll be happy trap. When I lose 10 pounds, when I get the promotion, when the kids are grown, that's not living. That's waiting. Acceptance means grounding yourself in the reality of this present moment because it's the only place life is actually happening.
Okay, past and future are off the table. What's next?
Other people's internal states. You cannot change what other people think, what they feel, or what they do. Full stop.
That's a huge one. I think 90% of human effort is trying to do exactly that.
It is. We try to argue people into feeling differently or shame them into behaving better. We can influence, we can inspire, we can set boundaries. But we cannot crawl inside their head and flip a switch. Accepting that frees up an incredible amount of energy.
Okay. And the third, unchangeable.
This one is maybe the most important for self-compassion. Your own automatic thoughts and emotions. You cannot stop that first initial flash of anger or envy or fear. It's the tiger in the room response. It's too fast, too deep.
So radical acceptance here is not trying to not feel the envy.
It's just observing it without judgment. It's saying, okay, envy is here. That's interesting. Not, I'm a terrible person for feeling envious of my friend's success.
Because that second thought, the self-criticism, is the non-acceptance.
It's a second arrow you shoot into yourself. The first arrow is the pain of the envy. The second is the suffering of judging yourself for it. Radical acceptance is just letting the first arrow be there without adding the second.
Okay, so that's the stuff we have to let go of. What about the changeable? Where do we put all this freed up energy?
Number one, our own behavior and reactions. This is your zone of power. You can't stop the flash of anger, but you can choose not to send the angry email. You can choose to take a walk. You can choose to breathe for 10 seconds before you speak. That space between stimulus and response, that's where your freedom is.
What's next?
Boundaries. A boundary isn't about changing the other person. It's about changing your own participation. Saying, no, I can't stay late tonight, isn't trying to change your boss's demanding nature. It's a productive action you take to protect yourself. It's a change you can actually make.
And the third one?
Environment. And this comes with a huge warning label. Radical acceptance is not for situations of abuse or genuine threat. If you are in a physically or emotionally dangerous environment, acceptance is not the skill. The skill is leaving. Conscious fleeing is a powerful, productive action. It is not a failure of acceptance.
That is such an important distinction. Acceptance is for the inevitable pain of life, not for tolerating preventable harm.
Precisely. And one last point on change. The goal must be integration, not replacement. If you hate your spontaneous, chaotic self, the solution isn't to become a rigid, hyper-organized robot. That's just replacing one prison with another. Integration means expanding your toolbox so you can choose to be organized when you need to be and spontaneous when it serves you. You have access to both, consciously.
That feels like the true definition of the wise mind we started with, having the full range of human experience available to you.
And the wisdom to choose the right tool for the job.
So let's take all this and apply it to our relationships. That's where the rubber really meets the road. How does radical acceptance look when you're facing someone else's intense emotion? Their anger, their panic.
This is where we get into a concept called attunement. The standard model of attunement, what you learn in, say, parenting classes, is to validate their emotion. I can see you're really angry, and then you model extreme calm. You become the serene rock in their emotional storm.
Great, be the calm one. Don't escalate.
And that works great in a dynamic where there's a power imbalance, like parent-child or therapist-client. But here's the controversial part. In a peer relationship, with a partner, a friend, a colleague, that approach can sometimes backfire.
How can being calm make things worse?
Because your perfect, unshakable calm can be perceived as judgment. They're at a level 10 of chaos, and you're at a level 1 of serenity. The gap is huge. And they can feel like you're looking down on them from your enlightened perch, which makes them feel even more alone and out of control.
So they get louder to try and pull you into the storm with them to close that gap.
Exactly. They are subconsciously testing you. Are you with me in this, or are you just judging me? So the alternative method is what we can call dynamic attunement plus change.
Okay, I'm intrigued and a little scared. What does that mean?
It means for a brief moment, you intentionally match their intensity.
Wait, what? You want me to get angry with the angry person? That sounds like pouring gasoline on a fire.
It's not about matching the content of their anger. It's about matching the energy. If they're speaking with a level 9 intensity, you might respond for a second with a level 8 intensity. You're closing the emotional gap. You're signaling, I get it. I have this capacity within me too. We're on the same field.
But isn't that just validating their out-of-control behavior?
Here is the absolute key.
Mm-hmm.
The mash has to be incredibly brief, and it must be immediately followed by the change. You match the energy for a moment to connect, and then you very consciously, very visibly de-escalate. You take it down to a 7, then a 6.
So you're showing them the path down. You're not just telling them to calm down from on high. You are modeling how to do it.
You are demonstrating that regulation is a choice available even to someone who understands their intensity. It completely short-circuits their pattern. They were expecting you to fight them or to lecture them. They weren't expecting you to join them for a second and then lead them out.
You're replacing the hierarchy of calm person versus crazy person with a peer-to-peer connection. I can go there with you, and now let's walk back together.
It's an incredibly powerful way to inspire co-regulation. It validates their emotional state while modeling emotional control. It's tricky. It requires self-awareness, but when it works, it's almost like magic.
That is a seriously advanced move. It brings this whole idea of accepting the intensity, then choosing a new path right into a live interaction.
So to pull all these threads together, let's synthesize the big takeaways from this deep dive into radical acceptance.
Let's do it.
First, and most fundamentally, you have to accept reality because your brain literally cannot change what it's actively fighting. Non-acceptance keeps you locked in survival mode. Remember the formula. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Second takeaway for me is look inward first. When you're intensely triggered by someone else, they are almost always just a mirror for a part of yourself you've rejected. My colleague wasn't the real problem. My own rejected chaos was.
And third, don't forget the positive triggers. They're just as revealing. If you need external praise to feel okay, you need to radically accept that internal vulnerability and start the work of building your own sense of worth.
Okay, so let's give everyone a practical challenge for this week. Something concrete.
I have 2. First, practice observing your positive highs. The next time you get a big compliment or a win, pause. Ask yourself that question. What would the opposite of this feeling be, and why is this high so powerful in holding that fear at bay?
And the second challenge.
Consider trying dynamic attunement. In a safe relationship with a partner or a good friend, the next time they're really activated, see what happens if you briefly match their energy level before you start to bring it down, just to show you're with them.
That's a brave one.
It is. But the final closing thought is this. This whole process is constant. It never ends. There's no finish line where you're cured of your patterns. But the simple fact that you can now observe the pattern without judgment, that awareness is the beginning of change. That's where all the power is.
A really powerful deep dive. Thank you for walking us through some very challenging territory.
My pleasure.
Next time, we get even more practical. We're moving into the acronyms, the first aid kits of distress tolerance. These are the concrete things you can do in the heat of the moment after you've found that first bit of acceptance to manage the physical and emotional surge. We'll see you then.
Until then,